Hey guys, it's Claire Rose here again, and today I'm going to be bringing you a bookish unhaul. I know it might seem a little bit strange for me to be bringing you an unhaul before I've ever posted a book haul on this channel, or at least in my revamped channel, but you know what? These are strange times that we're living in. I cannot go out to the bookshops at the moment. I'm in the middle of lockdown. I can't go and buy all the books that I want, can't go to bookstores or thrift stores or anything. And I'm not wanting to buy a lot of books online, or I am wanting to buy a lot of books online, but I know that I shouldn't. I know that I have other things that I should be spending my money on. And so as a result of that, I have limited ways of getting books into my possession. I'm going to see if I can move the camera angle a little bit. This isn't really working for me. There we go. Is that better? I've moved you back quite a long way so you're not quite so in my face. As I said, this will be a book unhaul, and in order to make this a little bit more entertaining for you guys and a little bit more entertaining for me to film, I'll be following the format that I think it was Books and Lala originally did, where there is an unhaul tag. There is a list of questions for you to answer, or challenges almost. Basically, there's a list of things and each one relates to a book on your shelves which you will then be getting rid of. I have got the list in front of me and I have picked out books which I think correlate to each question. I have done this ahead of time. This isn't going to be like a live reaction or anything because that's not the way my brain works. I'm not going to be able to just instantly pull a book off my shelf and instantaneously decide that that's the book I'm getting rid of. I'm far too indecisive for that. So this is the way we're doing things. First on that list is a book that you rated low. As will be no surprise to anybody who watched my recent vlog series, I will be getting rid of Marina by Carlo Ruiz Zafón. I did not love this book. I quite liked the story to it and I liked the atmosphere, but the pacing was way off for me and the way it was written just was not great. The descriptions were good, but the actual writing of the storyline, not great. So that's kind of hard for me to explain, but yeah, this one got a low rating for me. Not like a really low rating. This wasn't like a 1 star. This was between like a 2 and a 3 star. So I will be getting rid of this. Normally when I unhaul books, I would be taking them to my local thrift store, my local charity shop, but as we are in lockdown and as all of the charity shops are closed, that won't be happening. I will be getting rid of these books some other way. I will either be putting them into bags and storing them until such a time as the charity shops reopen, or I will be putting a bookstall outside my house. But either way, these books will be gone by the time anybody sees this video, or at least they'll be on their way to being gone. So I cannot send these books to you. I couldn't afford that even if I had the ability to. So don't ask for any of these books. If you like the look of them, I mean, I probably would say I don't know why you did for a lot of them, because that's why I'm unhauling them. Next on the list is a book you changed your mind about, and Kayla was very open about this. She left it open to interpretation as to how you chose to interpret that prompt. I have gone for a book which I changed my mind about whilst reading. And for that I have chosen Good Me, Bad Me by Ali Land. This book I started out reading and was really loving it. This was going to be one of my favourite books of all time. I was flying through it, absolutely fast paced, fantastic, really gripping thriller. And then the ending happened, and the ending was so diabolically awful that it just changed my mind about the entire book. I then hated this book. I hated the ending. It made me hate the entire book. And since reading that ending and my feelings changing about this book, I have then gone back in my mind and realised all the other things that were problematic about this book and that were wrong about this book and that should have made me hate it earlier, but I was so carried away by the actual storyline that I put all that aside, and I would have been willing to put all that aside if it had not been for that terrible ending. So yeah, getting rid of this one. I'm glad to see it finally going off of my shelves. I don't know why I've held on to it for so long. Next is a series you won't be completing, and I'm quite pleased with this because it means I can get rid of more than one book at a time. I will not be completing the Poison Study Magic Study, this series by Maria V. Snyder. Oh, it says on the back, The Chronicles of Ixia. I will not be continuing on with this series, at least I highly, highly doubt it. I read the first book, which is called Poison Study. I read it years and years ago. It was a gift anyway at the time, or I think I borrowed the first one. These two books were a gift, and it makes me feel really bad that I'm getting rid of them unread, but I appreciate they were gifted to me, and I appreciate the fact that the opportunity was given to me to read the series. I read the first book, as I said, and I had every intention of carrying on with it, but I just have never gotten around to it. The first book was good, it was fine, there was nothing offensive about it. I really enjoyed it actually at the time. I could acknowledge that it wasn't the best written book ever, but I had fun reading it, and I think I was in a headspace at the time where I thought, that's fine, I can read books just because they are fun and because I enjoyed them in the moment, and that's cool, I still can do that. But I now know that I have moved on in my life, and I'm at a point where I would not enjoy these books, even if they are fun and fast paced. There's elements of them that I would not enjoy now, particularly the romance aspect and the way in which the romance of these books is presented. I would not personally enjoy so much. So I will be getting rid of books 2 and 3 in this series. If ever I did decide to go back to this series, I could pick them up again fairly cheaply. They're in quite frequent use in charity shops and so forth, so I'm not really losing anything here. Next up is a book that you DNF'd. I do not DNF a lot of books anymore. I really, really hate doing it. I will force myself to read through books that I am not enjoying. A case in point of this being the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Hated that book, forced myself to read it from cover to cover so that I can tell you all how much I hated it, but also just because when I was younger, I used to go through this thing of never finishing a book. I would start reading loads and loads of books, get over halfway, get a good chunk of the way through, and then I would put them down and I would never touch that book again. And I don't like that part of myself and that part that used to do that. So I have now made a bit of a choice with myself to never DNF a book, which means I'm a lot more careful in the books that I put on my shelf, or supposedly, and I am more careful in the books that I start reading. If I don't think I'm going to like a book, I just won't start reading it. If my reading tastes change while it is on my TBR shelf, I will consider getting rid of that book. But one book that I did DNF is Dead Witch Walking by Kim Harrison. I picked this book up secondhand anyway. It was at my old university on a shelf that was like a take something, leave something shelf. Don't know if any of you guys know what I mean, where they would have things that students had left for free, and if you left something, you could take something from the shelf. There were books, magazines, DVDs, games, all of that sort of thing on there. And I picked up this book in exchange for one that I had left behind. And I started reading it and I got a good chunk of the way through. Really liked it, but then just gave up. Similar to the Maria V. Snyder book, this was a lot of fun to read. It was not the most well-written book ever, and even more so now, I can see that it was not the best written book. It's very tropey, very stereotypical fantasy, urban fantasy, with lots of tropes thrown in, lots of basically like all of everything plus the kitchen sink thrown in terms of supernatural creatures, or at least that's my memory of it. I did enjoy it at the time though, like I said, but it's been too long now, and I just don't think I will ever get around to finishing it. I have thought about continuing on with this book or starting it again so many times because I did enjoy it when I started reading it, but I look at all the other books on my shelf that I would rather read before this one, and I think it's time that I let it go. Next up, a book that you have multiple copies of. I don't really have a lot of books that I have multiple copies of, the exception being the Harry Potter series, of which I have my originals, the illustrated editions, the audiobooks, and the Slytherin edition of the first book as well. I will not be getting rid of any of my Harry Potter books. You will take those from my cold, dead hands. What I do have 2 copies of is The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. This is quite a nice book to unhaul because I'm not unhauling it for any negative reasons. I'm only unhauling it because I have a better copy on my shelf. What happened with this book is my mum read it. She thought I would really enjoy it, so she passed it on to me, sort of, but it stayed on our communal bookshelf. And then at some point, we think it went missing. We're not sure how exactly. So I bought another copy, read it, really liked it, and then years later the original copy turned up on the bookshelf. That's like a very long, convoluted way of me explaining why I have two copies of this book. I really love The Lovely Bones. I find it a very moving story, a very captivating story. For those of you who don't know, this is the story of a girl called Susie Salmon who is murdered when she is 13 years old, which is a very harrowing start to a book and a very harrowing premise. But this story then goes on after her death and is following her in heaven, but also overviewing her family and how they cope with the fallout from her death, how they are impacted by it, and how everybody who knew her is impacted by her death and by her murder and her disappearance, because there's parts of this where you never know, will the family find her body, will they know ever what happened to her? And if you can get past that darkness of the first chapter or so, if you can perhaps even skim read over parts of this book that may make you feel uncomfortable, I would really recommend persevering with it, but go in with heavy trigger warnings. This does have obviously warnings for child death, and she dies at the hands of a paedophile. So there's that to contend with if you decide to pick up this book. This is my old battered copy that I read. It went into my college bag when I was at college, got very battered around, the cover, the spine ripped off entirely at one point, and I have a much nicer copy, which is my mum's original copy, on my shelf, which I will be keeping. Now we have a book that you will never actually get to, one that you will never actually get around to reading, and for this I have gone for The Year of Reading Dangerously, How 50 Great Books Saved My Life by Andy Miller. I was gifted this book, I believe, by my mum. I can't remember if I asked for it or whether it was one that she gifted to me back when I first started at university, the first time when I was studying English and creative writing. And this is a book which I can see why she got it for me. It seems like it would appeal to a creative writing student, and it did. It's about this man, Andy Miller, who had not read many books since school and then found himself commuting in and out of London on a regular basis and decided to use that time on the commute to read 50 books. And there were some classics, some modern books, some books that he read when he was at school, or some books that he should have read when he was at school but he never actually got around to it. And it's about how these books engaged him with a love of reading again, engaged him in emotional discussions and intellectual discussions about these books. And yeah, that's what this book is about. Quite an interesting premise, but it's not one that I'm particularly interested in, particularly as a lot of the books in this that he discusses in this book are not ones that I myself am particularly drawn to. I don't read classics. I don't read books that are generally seen as highbrow, or I don't instantly gravitate towards them at any rate, because I find that just because something is seen as literary or something is seen to be really intellectual and really highbrow doesn't mean I'm going to like it. And in fact, that makes me like it a little less, because I know that it's supposed to be a good book, and because these old dead guys have said that it's supposed to be a good book, then I should think it's a good book. Andy Miller's not dead, as far as I'm aware, but you know what I'm saying. Somebody has said that this is supposed to be a great book. It doesn't necessarily mean that I will find it to be a great book. The next challenge on the list is to get rid of a book that you bought because of the hype. I don't have so many books that I bought because of the hype anymore. Used to be really terrible for that when I was first on BookTube. This book isn't even really that hyped on BookTube, but it is hyped in the wider literary community. And that book is Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. Now, anybody who is into vampire fiction will have heard of Anne Rice. She is seen by many as like the forebear of modern vampire fiction. What has put me off from reading this book is what I know about Anne Rice as a person now. I have come to know more facts about Anne Rice that have really put me off of ever reading one of her books again, particularly in response to her attitude towards fandom and fan fiction and fan creations, and how she has treated some of her fans in the past, which has just really made me not like her at all. I don't think she's a nice person, and I don't wish to be supporting her, and for that reason I will be getting rid of Interview with a Vampire, never reading it, and never reading another Anne Rice book. Next is a book that you bought because of the cover. Similar to The Hype, I don't really buy a lot of books based on covers. Certainly not at the moment because I can't go into a bookshop and see any covers. But even prior to that, it's not something that I have done a lot of, at least not recently. I, again, have matured, know my book tastes, tend to look a little bit deeper than the cover. I have not bought a book before because of the cover, but that's a whole other story. So I didn't really have a book that I could get rid of for that prompt, but what I have decided on is a book that I have kept on my shelf for a long time because it is so beautiful, and that is Between the Lines by Jodi Picoult and Samantha Van Leer. This is the only Jodi Picoult book I've read. I have others on my shelf and I do want to give her a try at some point. This is a book that she wrote in conjunction with her daughter. Her daughter is Samantha Van Leer, and they wrote this book together. It is a book, as far as I remember, it's about a girl who reads a lot of books, and then one day she finds a book in which the characters start interacting with her. The main character of the story starts interacting with her, and he wants to escape his story. He wants to come into the real world and find real life, real experiences, and live beyond the pages of his book. That is quite an appealing idea, but I didn't find it particularly well executed in here. In particular, one thing that I remember really irritating me about this is that the back cover, it makes it sound as though from the back cover that the main character is going to disappear inside a book. She is writing her goodbye note on the back, where she's basically explaining why she doesn't want to live in this world anymore, why she's going to go and live in a fictional world. Hate to spoil it for you, but that never happens. That is very misleading, and I remember going through the whole book thinking, when is this going to happen? And it never actually does. So that's misleading. The book itself was not particularly well executed, but it does have some gorgeous, gorgeous illustrations inside. If I can find one, I will show you. So it has some really lovely illustrations. Like there's the dragon, and where's another one? Some like cool mermaidy underwater scenes. So yeah, gorgeous internal book, not such a lovely cover, but you know, I think it's in the same realm, so I think this just about counts, and that is why it has stayed on my shelves for all these years. But it's entirely pointless because there has never been a point in those years where I have thought, wow, I really want to go and look at the pictures in that Jodi Picoult book. So I think it is time that I pass this on its way and somebody else can buy it or pick it up and enjoy all those lovely pictures for themselves, and perhaps enjoy the story a little more too. The second to last prompt on the list is to get rid of a book that you know nothing about. I couldn't find any books that matched that description. I have many books on my shelves which are unread, but I know a bit about each of them. What I do have are some books which I know very, very well, and I would like to get rid of them now. And these are the books that I had to study when I was at university the first time around. So we have, these are pretty much the standard ones you would expect for an English literature creative writing student to be studying. We have Paradise Lost by John Milton, King Lear, that's a Shakespeare book, the rest are all Shakespeare. Midsummer Night's Dream, didn't actually study this one at university, performed in a performance of it, as you can see by my little tabs here, and I'm happy to get rid of this. The Tempest by William Shakespeare, and As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. These were all, apart from Midsummer Night's Dream, books that I studied at university. I was then in the performance of Midsummer Night's Dream, as I said, and I have nothing against Shakespeare's works. I really passionately disliked them when I was a child because of the way that you are forced to study them in school in England in particular. I have come around to liking Shakespeare's books more now as an adult, and I do have an appreciation for them now. I particularly have an appreciation for them when I have performed in them. I also do amateur dramatics, and so anytime that I have performed in a play, I have a strong connection to it, or when I have seen a really good performance of it. But those books in particular, one, it irritates me because none of them match, and they're not the copies that I necessarily would choose if I were to pick up a collection of Shakespeare's works. That's not something I intend on doing anytime soon, partly because of space reasons. I only have these 2 bookshelves in my room, but also I just don't see the point in it. They're not books that I am going to go back and read and reread for pleasure. if I was to be in a performance of any of those plays, I would go out and buy a new text that I wanted to read and that I wanted to happily highlight my parts in and make notes and annotations on. I'd be happy to do that then. But those particular copies are just taking up space on my shelves. They hold memories of a time in my life which I have now grown out of. They hold some good memories and some bad memories, but I just don't want them on my shelves anymore. And finally on the list, we have a book that you did not buy yourself. This is a particularly difficult one for me to do. I've already gotten rid of one book which was gifted to me by my mum and some books that were gifted to me by a friend. Whoa, that was weird. The camera just stopped filming randomly. I don't know what happened there, but anyway, we're back in business. As I was saying, I don't like getting rid of books that have been gifted to me because they were given to me by somebody that I care a lot about, and that person obviously cares a lot about me. So even if I didn't end up loving that book, I want to keep it as a mark of my friendship or my relationship with that person. We'll now be getting rid of Staying Alive, which is a collection of poetry by many different poets. There are some of my favourite poems in this collection. This was gifted to me by a good friend who loves poetry and who knows that I love reading. They didn't know that I'm not a massive fan of poetry, and in fact, some of the poems in here do happen to be my favourites. The collection as a whole holds bad memories for me because this is the anthology that I had to study at university. I gave up that copy and then a friend very generously gifted this to me several years later. But now all I remember is having to study poetry at university and having to study these particular poems when I really passionately hated that poetry course. This book of poetry is not a very pretty collection of poetry in my opinion. It has some very good poems, some not so good poems, and the poems are so wide-reaching in theme and tone, genre, era, that there seems to be no cohesiveness to this poetry collection either. You can see where I have tabbed some of my favourites, but I could very easily buy much smaller, much prettier and much more concise editions of these poems or books containing these poems elsewhere, and they would fit in nicer on my shelves, and I would be far more likely to go back and read those individual poems in another format, not in this big chunky book which already holds bad memories for me. I feel really bad. I never told my friend at the time, and I'm still never going to tell her, and hopefully she will never ever see this video and she will never know what I think about this book. I still love that she gifted it to me, and bless her for ever gifting me books, because she keeps gifting me books and I keep telling her not to because the chances are I have already owned them, and this has happened several times with this friend where she will buy me a book that I already own, and that's just awkward. Hopefully we've moved past that now that I have got an Amazon wish list where I can show it to her if she wishes to buy me books. But yes, this book I will be getting rid of. Oh gosh, this isn't even all the books. Wow, this is going to be a good thumbnail. Here are all of the books that I am getting rid of. This isn't even all of them. Half of them are still on my bed. I couldn't pick them all up. But these books I will be getting rid of, unhauling, passing on to various different people, and just not having on my bookshelves anymore. Oh, that's a relief. At least being in lockdown, now is a good time to declutter and spring clean and get rid of books off of your shelves that you don't want anymore, to have a good clear out in your wardrobe and try and just get rid of all of that excess baggage that you no longer need in your life. That's what I'm telling myself anyway, because otherwise I would just fall into a very deep depression again, which we don't want to happen. So let's look for the positive side of things. Speaking of positives, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and to just leave your general thoughts down below on what you thought of these books. Are there any that you wish I wasn't getting rid of? If so, you better get in there quick, because these books will be going very quickly. Are there any books on this list that you also hated, or that you are glad that I am getting rid of? Please know that whatever I said about any of these books, it doesn't impact the way that you enjoy these books. If you like these books, that's fantastic. I have no issue with you or your personal taste in books. We can still be friends. We can still chat down below. It's all going to be good. That was it for my very first book unhaul on this channel. Hopefully I'll be able to bring you another haul soon, which will be a bit more positive. Until then, just know that I look forward to talking to you, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!